Hello, I want to introduce you to this book, Teaching the Dimensions of Literacy. And we will be using this in this course. You will have access to this book from the link within ReggieNet, and it takes you straight to the Milner Library electronic copies of this book. So it's got some complex ideas in it, but some very powerful ideas. So again, we're thinking about literacy as something that is multidimensional. And there are different ways to explain, the multidimensional nature of literacy. And we're going to look at different theories. But one way to look at it is from these dimensions that they highlight for us. The linguistic dimension of literacy. So that's when you're really thinking about different texts and different letters and signs within language. So really focused in on all the different kind of communication systems that we use with literacy. And then another way to think about literacy is from a cognitive perspective. So all the different mental processes that go on in our heads as we are reading and writing. And those are really important as an educator because a lot of those processes are really invisible to children. So we have to get really good at trying to model those processes for children and make them visible to them. Another important aspect of literacy that is discussed in this book is the social cultural dimension of literacy. So too often we see literacy as this kind of individual act, but really literacy is highly connected to our social identities, our communities. So it's really important to think of literacy in those terms as well, and to think about the purposes of literacy and how we might use literacy for advocacy and social justice. And then across all those dimensions, we can think of literacy from a developmental perspective, from a perspective of growth and learning. Like what does it look like for students to learn all those different linguistic and cognitive and social dimensions, and what kind of tools and materials are going to really help them to do that. So again, many different ways to think about literacy. And in the introduction to this book, I'm not going to get you to read it, it's very short, but they state that effective literacy instruction involves more than passively following and implementing a series of recipes. And often we have a situation in schools these days where teachers are just kind of given curriculum that they're supposed to passively implement with their students. And of course we know that is so problematic, right? We want teachers to be the experts that know their students really well and know what is best for their students. So that they state, teaching is a conscious, reflective, and constructive process whereby teachers enact instruction based on their knowledge of their discipline. And in this case, we're talking about reading and writing processes, right? So we want you to have a really strong knowledge of the discipline of reading and writing and knowledge of their children, okay? And you as special educators in particular realize how important it is for you to really know your children. And this is only possible if practitioners have a deep understanding of how the literacy process is actually learned and developed. So throughout this book, and it's got some really complex ideas in it, you're going to find that you might need to read and reread. Again, that's a strategy that you need to teach children. Like depending on the complexity of the text, you might have to slow down your reading processes. You might have to, pause and say to myself, did I really understand that? Does that make sense? And these are all strategies that good readers use while they're reading a text. So the first part of the text I'm going to ask you to read is actually really short. It's only a few pages long. But again, it contains a lot of complex ideas, and I'm going to ask you to sort of really process those ideas. You'll see, even in my copy, like I have a lot of notes on the side of the page and different parts highlighted, because these are really complex ideas. So think carefully, and I'm going to ask you to do a forum post that is going to really help you to reflect on your reading, and to develop your understanding of these important ideas. So look forward to reading your responses.